Regarding the stages involving the Samadhi of Cessation, at the sixth stage Bodhisattvas, Sravakas, and Pratyeka Buddhas enter the Samadhi of Cessation. At the seventh stage Bodhisattvas think thoughts in this Samadhi without characteristics of self-existence, but Sravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas are aware of a practitioner and practice and are not able to think thoughts. While Bodhisattvas see the three realms as mind, will, and conceptual consciousness without a self up to the seventh stage, on the eighth stage mind, will, and conceptual consciousness cease. Those who rather cultivate their own projections remain trapped by characteristics of external entities and see subject and object. While Sravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas are seduced by the bliss of Samadhi at the eighth stage and create the thought of Nirvana, Bodhisattvas do not enter Nirvana because they have the support of the Buddhas. The sequence of stages is to prevent Bodhisattvas unaware of the stages from falling prey to the doctrines of other paths. Nothing arises or ceases but is mind only, the stages are for those who are unaware. Ultimate truth has no stages. Moreover, while Sravakas and Bodhisattvas fall prey to the conception of Nirvana at the eighth stage, Bodhisattvas do not due to their past vows. Like someone dreaming about crossing a river and awakening before they are across, it was due to habit energy that different things appeared in the mind, will, and consciousness previously. After transcending projections of subject and object, they undertake the work of the Dharma for the benefit of others. One realizes all is mind only on the seventh stage, has no projections on the eighth stage, and benevolent bodhisattva activity is carried out on the ninth and 10th. But the order of stages is ultimately meaningless, as all are projections. Tathāgatas are neither permanent nor impermanent. If permanent, the problem would be a first cause that is not itself caused. If impermanent, the problem would be the impermanence of a first cause, and their scanners would cease to exist, when Tathāgatas do not themselves cease. All that is caused is impermanent. But if everything were impermanent, then the qualities of a Tathāgata, such as knowledge, attainments, and so forth, would be caused, and thus everything would be a Tathāgata since their causal basis would be the same. So, Tathāgatas are neither permanent nor impermanent. Tathāgatas are not permanent like space, since space is meaningless. Moreover, space transcends permanence and impermanence. Tathāgatas are not permanent like that which does not arise, like rabbit horns, because, like space, they are meaningless. A Tathāgata's attainment by realization, however, is permanent, and the Dharma is fixed and abiding regardless of the Tathāgata's appearance in the world. Awakened ones dwell in realization, not in space. Their knowledge is attained by prajna, and not through the aggregates, sense spheres, or sense bases. The world arises based on false projections, but not the Tathāgatas. Permanence and impermanence are only found in duality. Distinctions of language occur with foolish people, the wise once and for all transcend words and thus permanence and impermanence. The Tathāgata, or Buddha nature, is the cause of whatever is good or bad, like an actor who changes characters. Not understanding, people suppose a self arises from the threefold combination of sense object, sense faculty, and sense consciousness. When impregnated by habit energy, the Tathāgata is known as the storehouse consciousness, an ocean with waves. But it is essentially pure and clear. The other consciousnesses arise due to mistaken grasping, not understanding names and appearances are projections of one's own mind. Only when senses stop functioning do they enter the Samadhi of Cessation. But when cultivating truths of liberation they may fail to purify the storehouse because the consciousnesses continue to arise due to causes and conditions. Seeing the Tathāgata, the five dharmas, the modes of existence, and to know selves, one ceases to exist as an illusory being. They thus progress to the unshakable eighth bodhisattva stage. Supported by the Buddhas during their samadhis, they do not grasp the bliss of samadhi or ultimate reality and complete the 10 stages. Thus, bodhisattvas should purify the Tathāgata and the storehouse consciousness. Because their storehouse exists, wherein they mistakenly see arising and cessation, they can also know they must have a Tathāgata, a Buddha nature. Although the Tathāgata is pure, it appears impure because of the dust of sensation. I used my spiritual power to support Queen Shrimala in explaining the storehouse consciousness and Buddha nature, but you must be diligent in reflecting on them. Only the wisest bodhisattvas and the Buddhas can truly understand them.
Mamadi requests the Buddha to explain the five dharmas, modes of existence, forms of consciousness, and two no-selves. The Buddha explains.
The distinguishing characteristics of these matters include name and appearance, projection, correct knowledge, and suchness. Understanding these, one can attain awakening, seeing them as projections of one's own mind. Fools give rise to projections, and not the wise, because they let their thoughts wander along the lines of appearances. They fall into views of a self and desire to excel. When inflamed, karma associated with desire and anger accumulates, and they become like silkworms in their own cocoons, not realizing these are like a moon in water and devoid of origination, duration, or cessation, arising from projection. As for appearances, these correspond to the six senses. Projection is the fabrication of names and applying them to appearances, thinking they are one thing and not another. For example, this is a man, this is an elephant, and so forth. But names and appearances are indistinguishable and are neither annihilated nor eternal. Bodhisattvas do not assert them, knowing they do not arise. This is suchness. Dwelling in suchness, one reaches the bodhisattva stage of joy, leaving the realms of other paths forever, and developing and understanding of dharmas as illusory, eventually reaching the 10th stage, and bringing other beings to maturity according to their capacities, fulfilling the bodhisattva stages. As for the three modes of reality and the 8 forms of consciousness and the two no-selves, they are all included in the 5 dharmas. Because the mind and what belongs to it arise with name, like the sun with rays, they are the dependent mode. Since correct knowledge and suchness are indestructible, they are the perfected mode. The projections, which are perceptions, are of 8 kinds corresponding to the 8 consciousnesses, but their appearances are not real. When twofold grasping to a self ceases, then twofold no-self arises. In this way, the stages to Buddhahood are also included in the 5 dharmas. As for the 5 dharma and how they involve the other teachings of the path, appearances are what has physical shape and features. Name is when a certain appearance is referred to as one thing and not another. Projection is designating names and pointing to appearances. Suchness is the fact that names and appearances are not graspable or knowable. Correct knowledge is knowing suchness so that one does not give rise to projections, as well as pointing it out to others.
Mamadi asks the Buddha to explain how the Buddhas are like the sands of the Ganges. The Buddha explains.
This is not to be accepted as stated, since Buddhas excel worldly comparisons. But since beings are attached to projections, to encourage beings who are disheartened, I teach them that beings are as many as the sands of the Ganges, but I need to encourage beings who need more effort. I say they are as rare as an Udambara flower. Tathāgatas are beyond comparison and the characteristics known by the mind, will, or consciousness. However, Buddhas are like the sands of the Ganges because when beings tread on that sand, it does not give rise to projections or thoughts of anger. Their self-realization is the Ganges, and the awakened ones are the sand. The sands of the Ganges is earth, but when the kalpa-ending fire burns up the earth, its essential nature arises together with fire, thus, it is truly indestructible, thus is the Dharma body. The sand of the Ganges is measureless, thus is the Tathāgata's light, which shines everywhere. Just as sand cannot desire to be other than sand, the Tathāgatas are free from birth, old age, and death because they have ended the cause of existence. Just as one cannot know if the sands of the Ganges increase or decrease, the same is so with the wisdom of the Tathāgatas because it is not a physical dharma. Just as pressing the sand of the Ganges does not produce cooking oil, as long as any being has not attained nirvana, Tathāgatas do not abandon beings for the joys of samadhi. Just as the sands of the Ganges flow together with the water of the Ganges, likewise all the Tathāgatas' teachings flow together with nirvana. Still, The Tathāgatas do not go or disappear anywhere. One cannot know the beginning of samsara, and thus it cannot be spoken of as going anywhere. To go, ultimately, means to cease to exist. Regarding how beings can know liberation without knowing the beginning of samsara, when one understands the external world as mind only, the cause of beginningless habit energy giving rise to projection ceases. Apart from projection, there is no external world or beings. Knowing that they are mind only, they end. All dharmas have features of duality. The five aggregates are based on mind, will, and consciousness, which nourish the habit energy of duality. Cultivating the bliss of samadhi and the bliss of whatever is present is good and undefiled. Duality, such as the view of good and evil, is rooted in the 8 consciousnesses. While these arise or cease, one is unaware that they are projections of one's mind. They arise and cease moment to moment. What is momentary is the storehouse consciousness, but while habit energy with will is momentary, its undefiled habit energy is not ephemeral, that is, it is nirvana. Unaware of this, beings apply their views of annihilation and destruction to uncreated dharmas. This is to say, they reify and grasp space, cessation, or nirvana. The 7 lower consciousnesses do not transmigrate, experience pleasure or pain, or cause nirvana. The Tathāgata does. Intoxicated with views, attachments to desire, attachments to form, attachments to formlessness, and the fundamental ignorance responsible for transmigration, foolish people are unaware that their view of momentariness is the mind under the influence of differentiation. Projections are the waves on the backdrop of the storehouse consciousness. Finally, realization is not momentary, just as gold does not diminish. If realization were momentary, the wise would not be wise. Foolish people mistakenly think the meaning of everything taught by the Buddha is momentary. The foolish see momentariness as applying to created things, but its true meaning is that afflictions end in a moment and nothing arises at all. Nothing arises or ceases, and continuity is due to distinctions and ignorance. Cessation is unceasing, but thoughts, depending on what isn't real, follow one another focusing on form. The world cannot destroy samadhis, relics, or heavenly palaces, thus, the abiding truths and perfect knowledge of a Tathāgata are not momentary. Illusions are also not momentary, but they cannot be causal agencies. There are 3 different kinds of paramitas. Firstly, the mundane kind. Regarding these, those attached to a self, clinging to dualities, carry out the paramitas in order to enjoy other states of existence, such as worldly power or rebirth in the heavens of Brahma. Secondly, the metaphysical kind. Regarding these, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas carry out the paramitas in order to enjoy the bliss of nirvana for themselves. Thirdly, the transcendent kind. Regarding these, bodhisattvas who realize projections to which they are attached are perceptions of the mind, not giving rise to projections or other states of existence. They engage in the transcendent paramitas. They do not give rise to projections of attachment to material appearances, objective conditions, what grasps and what is grasped, practicing with vigor, and the nirvana of the Shravakas when projections cease. As for wisdom, they examine the non-existence of the projections of one's mind with insight without falling into dualities and transforming their karmic body into an indestructible one, the Dharma body, and finally reach Buddha knowledge.
Mahamati asks the Buddha to teach regarding differences between Shravakas and Bodhisattvas, regarding the nature of Buddhahood, such as why he is protected by Vajrapani, or why he still appears to encounter karmic retribution or obstructions. The Buddha explains.
Complete nirvana is spoken of for those who would engage in bodhisattva practices. Those who would delight in the nirvana of the Shravakas are taught by apparition Buddhas to turn them towards Buddhahood. Ultimately, both are assured by Buddhas of Dharma nature, or Dharmata Buddhas, so their assurances don't differ. The taste of liberation does not differ when beings get rid of the obstruction of passion, but not the obstruction of knowledge. The obstruction of knowledge is purified firstly upon seeing no self, then when the seventh consciousness ceases and one is liberated from obstructions of dharmas, and then when the habit energy of the storehouse consciousness ceases, their purification of knowledge is complete. Relying on an underlying reality, time does not apply to the Buddha. I does not reason or reflect. I have no habit energy, afflictions, or death. I have realized no self, and removed the obstructions. Since the mind, will, and consciousness rely on momentariness, they are devoid of good non-karmic qualities, not resulting in samsara. However, the Tathāgatāra, or Buddha nature, is the cause of samsara and nirvana, because beings are confused by emptiness they don't understand. Those accompanied and protected by Vajrapani Bodhisattva are apparition Buddhas. Real Tathāgatas dwelling in the bliss of whatever is present and the knowledge of forbearance do not need protection by Vajrapani. Apparition Buddhas, however, are not created by karma, they are neither Buddhas nor different from Buddhas. They rely on mundane things when they speak the Dharma, but do not speak about their own understanding from the realm of personal realization, since they do not have their own experiences, because they are apparitions. Fools give rise to views of annihilation based on the cessation of the seven lower consciousnesses, and views of permanence based on not understanding storehouse consciousness. When projections cease, liberation occurs. When habit energy of ignorance and the four states of affliction stop, all faults stop. There are countless reasons for not eating meat, such as, because all beings have at some point been your family members. Because butchers indiscriminately mix the flesh of various and impure animals and humans. Because animals are raised on impurity. Because animals become afraid of the odor of those who eat meat. Because it prevents practitioners from giving rise to compassionate thoughts. Because fools attached to its stench are maligned. Because it makes mantras and dharanis ineffective. Because those who kill living creatures become attached to its taste and think about it when they see the creatures. Because those who eat it are abandoned by the devas. Because it makes your breath stink. Because it causes nightmares. Because tigers and wolves can smell it. Because it results in lack of restraint in food and drink. Because it prevents aversion to passions. Because in eating meat you should imagine you are consuming the flesh of your children or swallowing medicine just to sustain the body. The Buddha never approves of eating meat. Other reasons include: because in the past King Simhasodasa started eating meat and his ministers and subjects wouldn't accept it. They conspired to overthrow him and ended his reign. Because those who kill do so for profit in the market where ignorant people use money to catch their meat. When it comes to fish and meat, there is no such thing as not requesting, seeking, or thinking about it. On some occasions I prescribe different kinds of eating meat, but here I overrule these prescriptions in favor of not eating any meat. I never ate any meat, as I look on all beings as I would a child. Thus, practitioners avoid onions, leeks, garlic, alcohol, sesame oil, and beds of thorns because tiny insects cower inside. People attached to their purity after admitting the offense, blinded by projections, are reborn in carnivorous worlds. Rebirth as a Brahmin in a place of purity in a wise or noble family comes from not eating meat. All Buddhas proclaim the Laṅkāvatāra mantra to protect this sutra. If one memorizes, recites, and explains it to others, no being can trouble them. If misfortune occurs, an offending spirit will leave at once after it has been recited 108 times.
Tutte tutte vutte vutte patte patte katte katte amle amle vimle vimle nime nime hime hime bame bame kale 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 atte matte vatte tutte gyatte sputte katte katte latte पट्टे पट्टे दिमे दिमे चले चले पचे पचे बंधे बंधे अंचे मंचे दुतारे दुतारे पतारे पतारे अक्के अक्के सरके सरके चक्रे चक्रे दिमे दिमे हिमे हिमे टू 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 डू 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 रू 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 फू 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 स्वाहा.
The following mantra prevents one from being troubled by any being, particularly Rakshasas.
पद्मे पद्मादेवे हिने 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 चुचुले चुलु चुले फले फुला फुले युले घुले युला युले घुले घुला घुले पले पला पले मुंचे 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 छिंदे भिंदे भंजे मर्दे प्रमर्दे दिनाक्रे स्वाहा.
Memorizing these mantras is memorizing every word of the Laṅkāvatāra Sūtra.